This is Demon Marked, Book 1 of the Venandi Chronicles, an urban paranormal romance series. Written by Sara Snow. Narrated by Selena Salcido and Henry Shader for Hot Ghost Productions.
Chapter 4. Carter. I could sense her power, the woman that I was supposed to be keeping an eye on. Her power was strong and probably still growing without her even realizing it. That was going to be a problem, because I wasn't the only one who could sense it. Every demon and supernatural creature within 20 miles would be able to detect it, too. They'd all come for her. Demons were all about possessing power, so they would want her to join forces with them, and I'd never met a single demon who took the word no very well. If she tried to resist, she'd be eliminated. It was always a join us or die situation with those guys. Other supernatural creatures might want the same, or they might just be interested in killing her, either to absorb her power or eliminate a potential threat. Unlike some, Cambions got to choose what side they wanted to be on in the war against evil. They weren't necessarily bad just because they were the offspring of a human and a demon. Cambions got to decide their own destinies. The Cambion had a ton of power, so everyone wanted that behind them. The group I was part of, the Venandi, weren't above craving that power ourselves, but at least we didn't intend to harm her, and we wanted her help slaying evil beings. I just had to figure out the best way to approach the woman. Her powers were newly awakened, and I wasn't even sure if she'd realized she had them yet. Continuing to live her life as she'd known it was impossible. Danger lurked around every corner, so she could either learn to fight it alone, which would only keep her alive for so long, or join others who could help keep her safe. I was at her apartment building, waiting for her to arrive. My presence was hidden as I lurked in the shadows of the dimly lit parking lot by her apartment building. I'd chosen my position carefully, and no human would know I was there unless I wanted them to. Vampires were a different story.
"Interesting seeing you here,"
a smooth voice called out from behind me. I'd already sensed Dominic's presence, so I didn't react to him. "I've been here since before sunset," I said without turning around. The Cambion's car had just pulled in, and she was parking in her designated spot. "I don't suppose you would have been able to pull that one off yourself."
"Not without getting a hell of a tan,"
Dominic agreed with amusement in his voice. A normal vampire would burst into flame within seconds of being in direct sunlight, but a half-breed like me, I could handle it with no problem. I did prefer the dark of the night, though. It was part of my nature.
So that's the one,"
Dominic said, moving forward until he was standing next to me. His thin, pale face was a stark contrast to his black hair and clothing, and he looked almost like a floating head standing there in the shadows. His eyes were glued to the woman who was getting out of her car. I hadn't laid eyes on her yet, so I followed his gaze. Her back was toward us, and the first thing I noticed was her raven hair. Long and thick, it fell straight down to the middle of her back and looked to have an almost bluish hue in the moonlight. She was thin, that I could tell from her legs, which were covered in skinny jeans that were like a second skin, but the baggy hoodie she wore hung off one shoulder hid the shape of her body. Then she turned, and I sucked in a sharp breath. She was gorgeous. I'd been around for a long time, and I'd known some great beauties in my 70 years of immortal life, but there was something about this woman, with her high cheekbones, soft jawline, and Cupid's bow lips, that stirred something inside of me I hadn't felt in a long time. I wanted her. She was walking toward the apartment building when she suddenly stopped, her head swiveling around as if she sensed she was being watched and was trying to figure out the source. Dominic and I remained motionless as her unique purple eyes skimmed over the spot where we were standing. I knew there was no way she could see us, but for just a second, her gaze lingered, and I thought that she might have somehow spotted us. But it passed, and she moved on. Neither of us spoke again until she was inside. "Stay away from her," I said, still staring at the door she disappeared through. "She's under my protection."
"Yours? Or the Venandi's?"
"Both." Dominic didn't reply for a long moment, but I braced myself for a fight. He wasn't exactly the most hot-headed vampire I knew, but I was sure he wasn't here of his own volition. She'd sent him. The leader of the clan. My mother. She wouldn't be happy about my interference here.
You know that the Cambion has to make her own choice about which side she's on,
Dominic said, as if I needed to be reminded.
You can't lay claim to her just because you want her power.
I didn't bother to tell him that after getting a glimpse of that woman, her power wasn't the only thing I was interested in. I just pinned him with a withering stare. Tell my mother the same thing, would you? I grinned, showing my fangs. That was a clear invitation to fight among vamps, but Dominic was too even-keeled to be provoked into a fight. It was probably for the best anyway. Kingston wouldn't like it. As the leader of the Venandi, Kingston was especially interested in this Cambion. He'd been the first to sense her power, but that was something of a specialty among angels.
You know, Carter, you're welcome to come home whenever you'd like.
Dominic smiled, and I wanted to punch his pale face.
Your mother misses you.
No one else around to treat like dirt? This time Dominic chuckled, and it was a dark sound. Cold.
There's always someone. The weak are everywhere, Carter.
I gnashed my teeth together. As he faded further into the shadows, I wanted to pursue him, to show him just how strong I really was by putting him down once and for all. To hell with what my mother would say. But I resisted the urge. If I did that, I would be leaving the Cambion unprotected, even if it was just for a few minutes. That was a bad idea, and probably exactly what Dominic wanted. When I was alone again, I scanned the upper windows of the building. I didn't know which one belonged to her, but I could sense the general area her power was coming from, and as I watched, she crossed in front of one of the windows I was looking at. 3rd floor, 2nd window from the left. Movement nearby drew my attention back down to the parking lot, and I frowned when I saw the Soul Eater. Low-life scum. They were the bottom feeders of the supernatural world, but at least they were easy to kill. The thing looked human, but its power signature left no doubt as to what it really was, and now I had to stop it. Unbuttoning the black trench coat that fell down to my knees, I stepped out of the shadows just as the creature entered the apartment building. I shook my head. This was precisely the kind of thing that happened when you lived in a place that didn't have a doorman. Any soul-sucking being could just waltz right in. This woman had a lot to learn, but I had to save her first.